Welcome to JC NERR and How We Got Here, the show where you get an inside look into the stories and experiences that brought each of our staff here to the reserve. So I'd like to extend a special thank you to our guest today, Gregg Sakowicz. He's actually been with the reserve since 2003 as our field researcher. We are really excited to have you with us, and we are looking forward to hearing how you got here. So let's start all the way back in the beginning. So what was it that sparked your passion for science? What happened that made you realize that this was the field you wanted to be in?
Well, as far back as I can recall, I've always been interested in science. Like any young boy, I was interested in dinosaurs. But of course, you can only study dinosaurs so much through books and cartoons at the time. We didn't really have these cool CGI, shows on the Discovery Channel. And so eventually you read all the books and you want to see something for real, and in my backyard were fish. And so it was just kind of an easy transition to, now I get to do science for real in my mind at the time.
Okay. Now, did you grow up in an area that was around here?
I actually grew up in the Toms River area on a little tiny bay off of Barnegat Bay, Silver Bay. And so my parents had a house on the water. And so I was always fishing, for my birthday. I would get minnow traps and crab traps and seine nets because that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so as far as I can remember, I've always had that itch to be in and on and, sampling the waters.
Now, was that just you, or was your whole family always outdoorsy in the water? And
Yeah, I had a younger sister, and, she was probably at the time equally as interested in what was going on in our backyard. My parents always, I would say they prioritize experience over things. Mm-hmm. And so, I remember when my dad got a boat and we started fishing together there. We'd fish off the dock, but then we got the boat and started traveling down, to the southern end of Barnegat Bay, Barnegat Inlet, started fishing for real. And we would travel a bit. My parents, they took us on a cross-country trip, so I got to, fish for trout out in Colorado and, all sorts of cool stuff like that.
So having actually that experience of going cross-country and even just fishing in these different areas, where was your favorite place that you've ever fished?
Well, the memories associated with growing up fishing around here, but also Florida.
Okay.
We would travel, a lot of times we would travel around Easter down to the Florida and the Florida Keys in particular. And that area is cool because there's just such a variety of fish there, and you can fish off of, pull off the side of the road and fish under the mangroves. You could fish underneath pretty much every bridge down there, and it was always an adventure. You would throw a line in with a hook and a shrimp on it, and you didn't know what you were going to catch, and so I remember my parents would pick up these books with all like Florida Keys or Florida fishes, identifying guides, and so I was the little kid sitting there with the book under the bridge trying to ID every fish that we caught down to species. And incidentally, I actually just for the first time did that trip with my kids.
Okay.
And so my youngest daughter absolutely loves doing the fishing, and my middle daughter was the one with the book, or in this case on a cell phone,
right,
scrolling through fish IDs, trying to ID all the the variety of fish that we came up with. So
but that's great. They're have the family genes, and they're taking it on, and they're loving that.
Well, it was special to me because I grew up, and now I really greatly appreciate what my parents did for me then, and so I got to do the same thing with my kids.
Yeah.
So it was special to me.
Yeah. Now, so that was when you were at home. You were able to have all these cool experiences. Now, when you were your experience in school, like grade and high school, was there anything in particular that stood out that was a fantastic, either a class you took or maybe a field trip?
Not in particular, but I can tell you, so I was in a number of like AP programs when I was younger, and we had the Toms River school system at the time, and I'm sure still too, had really good science programs. In fact, there's one teacher who stands out to me, and this was in my high school years, a teacher by the name of Donald Holmquist. And he was, brilliant, excited, engaged. He was just a really, really fun teacher, very knowledgeable. And he definitely, I saw how like science wasn't the nerdy thing that was on, you know, every TV show and movie at the time. It was real people getting excited about what they did. And so that left the impression, and that kind of convinced me that when it was time to go to college, that, you know, I was going to keep doing the thing that was exciting me because I had this teacher who was excited at the time. And just to add, you know, in memoriam, he passed away of a brain tumor. I think either when I was in college or maybe a few years later, you know, brain cancer. And so to this day, I'm like, I still think about, like, when I get excited about something and I start to like get animated and active and, you know, just really into it, I do kind of think of him.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And it's nice that your work can kind of go to memorialize him too, because he had such that impact. Like, it seems like he was one that was kind of like kind of your anchor to start it all.
Yeah, so that was high school years, and so, you know, then went on to college and then continued and stuck with it.
Yeah. So with college, so you had this teacher was so influential to you. Where did you go when you were choosing a college? What was that process like? Was there somewhere that you knew you wanted to go, or was it kind of an exploration?
I didn't know at first. I applied to a lot of colleges, got into a lot of colleges, and then, you know, my parents, again, prioritizing experience over, you know, things again. Well, you know, we went on college tours, and we visited many colleges, and a lot of the colleges were great. But I actually eventually found myself wanting to go to a small college down on the west coast of Florida called Eckerd College.
Okay.
And Eckerd College is named Jack Eckerd, the guy who the Eckerd drugstore brand.
Okay, yeah.
He it was originally Florida Presbyterian College, and I think he came in and gave a large endowment, and they renamed the college after him. So I always have to explain that, because the first thing I say, Eckerd College, like the drugstore? Yes, actually.
Yes.
In this case, it actually is. But so, and Eckerd College is a liberal arts college, but it has a very strong marine sciences program. And so that drew me to the college. And admittedly, the college is also located on the water. It has a waterfront. And so, you know, I'm supposed to say, oh, I went there for the, you know, for the experiences and the offers and all that. But, you know, it was also on the water, which doesn't hurt. And so we had classes where, you know, it was a good day. Instead of sitting and getting lectured, we would grab seine nets and go out in the backyard and sample the fish there, you know, the fish and crustaceans in the local waters. And, you know, I was a college student, you know, with a seine net. And so, you know, I would still continue on the weekends, you know, seining up bait for fishing, but also, you know, observing and seeing what was in the waters at the time there too.
Yeah. And I know I went to Stockton University, which is it's growing, but when I went, it was still a smaller college, only one campus. Now with attending a smaller college, what kind of an impact do you think it had on your schooling?
Very big. Like, for example, one of the reasons why I selected Eckerd College was that at the other colleges and universities I was applying to, you know, you could get involved in research, but it typically wasn't until like your junior or senior year. At Eckerd College, I started working immediately my freshman year with a professor named Dr. Zilistowski. And I think he's still there. I don't think he's retired yet, but another really cool, energetic, immersive kind of professor who, you know, definitely encourages you to explore and to understand, not just to memorize. So, yeah, another influential figure in my life for sure.
Nice. Now, was there any courses in particular or any labs that you took that kind of stuck out as one of your favorites?
I'm going to say no. Okay. Only because I just remember enjoying pretty much every science class I took there. In fact, it was hard during those. There were some semesters it was hard to decide between the two that were being offered. And so it really, my no answer is really not because there wasn't any good ones. It was because they were all good. And for me, I'm like one of those lifelong learner personalities. I enjoyed, you know, my marine geology classes as much as I enjoyed my aquatic biology classes, as much as I enjoyed my ichthyology classes. And, you know, and again, as an undergraduate too, it was kind of neat at these small colleges where once you take the class, if you excelled at the class, they would often ask you to TA the next round of classes. And so
Okay.
I think from my sophomore to my senior year, I was TAing a few times a week as well as taking the classes too. But for me, that was exciting. I mean, it kind of hit the hobby level where you got a lot out of it. It wasn't work as much as it was engagement and talking with your peers and younger students, and it was just exciting.
Yeah, and I know it's ultimately the goal. You don't want to go have a career where you're going to a job. Like, you don't want it to feel like that. Like you said, it becomes almost like a hobby. It becomes, you come into work excited about what you do.
Sure, and I mean, I can say I learn something new, a few times a week in this position now, and so that's definitely one of the things that keeps me coming back.
Yeah. So that was a little bit about your background. Now, how, after you graduated college, did you have any other positions before you ended up here?
Well, let's see. After college, I applied to a number of graduate schools, and actually, originally, I was going to go into a molecular biology program. But my senior year at Eckerd, I got to work with some genetics, RFLP at the population studies. And while it was enjoyable, it was also sitting in a laboratory running chemistry on small tissue samples. And so it was kind of getting away from that day-to-day learning. It was kind of feeling mechanical. So I actually wound up deferring my acceptances, and I reapplied to a number of grad schools for ecology.
Okay.
To try to, once again, get into that lifelong learning, diverse field of study rather than just a very narrow kind of pigeonholed talent set, and so it came down to, I was accepted with funding to Florida University and Rutgers University. And so with Florida, the work that was being offered to me was kind of, again, pigeonholing. It was echinoderm research. I thought it was neat, but I was trying to figure out, is it neat enough that this is kind of where I want my career to start going? And with Rutgers, I interviewed with Dr. Kenneth Abel down at the Marine Field Station, and it was definitely more of a ecosystem-wide mindset. And so I came to Rutgers because it was kind of just felt like the right decision at the time, and I think it was.
And I think just by hearing just a little bit of your story, that I think if you had chose studying echinoderms, but yes, they are incredible, but it's kind of a straightforward, doesn't really give you that variability to go different directions with it and learn a whole just flux of information. And it seems that choosing that broader for you, just with your personality, would just kind of suit you so much better. I know I have experience working in a pharmaceutical lab, which was my first job out of college, which I was excited to be working in the field in some way, but I felt the same way. It was that mechanical, just going through the motions, stuck in a lab. It didn't have that right feel. It didn't feel like, you didn't feel like that's where you were meant to be.
And I felt that my talents and my abilities kind of were better suited for the field as well, and not the laboratory. I'm sure I could do it, but I like dragging a seine net. I like pulling traps and equipment out of the water, and I think it's not only what I like, it's also what I'm good at. So I felt like I wanted to do something I was good at.
Yeah. So then how long was your program? How many years for grad school?
I was actually a NERS Reserve Fellow with Dr. Kenneth Abel for about 3 years. So that was the graduate research fellowship that was offered at the time through the reserve system. And that lasted for a while. That actually went away due to funding restrictions for a few years. And it's being relaunched under like a revamped format as the Margaret A. Davidson Fellowship now. And so, it's no longer the Graduate Research Fellowship. It's the Margaret A. Davidson Research Fellowship, I guess, in memoriam to her. But also, it's a more diverse mindset with that fellowship as well. So, a little plug for the reserve system and what's coming out. We're once again funding research and research fellows, graduate students, and I have high hopes for the program going forward as well.
Nice.
So 3 years as a research fellow with Dr. Ken Abel. And while I was a research fellow, I was assisting the person who was in my position prior to me. That person wound up getting another job and leaving. And so I thought, well, I know how to do this. I'm good at it. And I have a bit of a passion for it. And so I applied for the position and they accepted me. And that was 2003.
Okay.
So
yes.
I've been in this position in some form since 2003. Obviously, my responsibilities, my duties have expanded a few times over the years, and so, but I've been around a while.
So now that you're here, what's a little kind of snippet into what you do on a day-to-day for JC NERR?
Well, through the reserve program, I serve as the swamp technician, the system-wide monitoring program. And so what I do on a day-to-day basis is I coordinate and execute the monitoring and the sampling that is part of that program. So operating water quality monitoring equipment, and that involves frequent calibration, recalibration, deployments, troubleshooting, telemetry systems. We broadcast the data to the GO satellite on a near real-time basis, and so every hour our systems update at the CDMO, the Central Data Management Office's server. And so the point I'm trying to make with that is that much of our data are live, they're available, and they're free. And so I know that fishermen use it, researchers use it, during storm events, shareholders and decision makers have access to those data. We also have a nutrient monitoring program. So monthly we go out and we sample the waters and run nutrient analyses. And what we're looking for are things like nitrogen and phosphorus species, things that, species being categories, and things that drive productivity. And so the point is, if you put a lot of nitrogen into a system, you feed the phytoplankton, and the phytoplankton populations bloom. And then eventually, when they consume all those resources, the phytoplankton starts to die back. That's when the bacteria come in. The bacteria consume essentially the carcasses of the phytoplankton. It draws the dissolved oxygen levels down. It drops the pH. The water becomes more acidic, and that changes the chemistry for the other life that's there. And so that's what results in a lot of times these stagnant water events, these low dissolved oxygen events, fish kills, crustaceans, also often perish. And so it's that's the primary reason why we sample, but it's not in a regulatory manner. It's more of in a long-term monitoring manner, where these data are available for our either in-house analysis, or also other groups can come and download our data if they need to fill a gap in their knowledge.
It's incredible that that's available to the public, not even just stakeholders, but also, say, if you're a professor and want to make this information available to your students. Anyone and everyone can view this, which is something that's incredible. I will actually include in the description of this, I'll actually put the resource that for anybody who is listening, that you can actually go and view this data and just kind of see what's happening in your backyard. So as you've had many years in this position so far, has there been any particular studies or any experiences that have stood out to you, or that have been a favorite, or have meant the most to you?
Well, so besides the swamp monitoring program, I'm involved in a lot of other research activities. And so over the years, we've been involved in, for a long period of time, I think from like 2004 to about 2013, we were involved in a lot of seagrass monitoring, a lot of seagrass research, some modeling, and that those efforts also utilized the swamp data as a baseline. So I got to kind of have my foot in both the monitoring end of things but also the research end of things. So that was important. We've done quite a bit of work actually with coastal eutrophication, which again is what I described before, where you have an excess of nutrients that drives phytoplankton, then bacteria, and then results in poor water quality in the end of the day. And so some pretty heavy lifting level work that was done in, say, Little Lake Harbor, which is the north end of our reserve, up into the north end of Barnegat Bay. And so we've had a pretty good geographical reach as well. Now we're doing a lot of work with marsh surface dynamics, so marsh platform dynamics, really. So let's see, we have the Sentinel Site program, which, so basically what that means is that the Tuckerton Peninsula has kind of been designated as a region to say, concentrate study, so that we can better understand the effects of climate change and sea level rise. So we have vegetation surveys going on. We have SETs, which are sediment elevation tables. And so what that does is we study the marsh platform, whether the marsh platform is collecting sediment and accreting, rising, and is that level of elevation increase keeping up with, say, sea level rise, or is it falling behind? And the take-home message is most of the East Coast in particular is losing that battle. The marshes are either collecting sediment at a rate too slow to keep up with sea level rise, or they're actually actively eroding away. And so we're facing a lot of potential wetlands loss as a result of that. I've also been involved in a NERR Science Collaborative project, which is also a marsh platform study, but it's in the context of climate change, but also the response of, say, nuisance mosquito populations. And so we've been working with CRISA, which is the Center for Remote Sensing and Spatial Analysis up at Rutgers. We've been working with the Mosquito Commission and kind of bringing a whole bunch of data sets together and actively doing field work together to understand these patterns of marsh changes and how that is either supporting nuisance mosquito populations, or in some cases you may be forcing mosquito populations out of those areas. It's a little bit more complicated than I'm describing, but the point is I get to have my feet wet in a lot of research, and it's, jack of all trades kind of situation, but it's kind of, I think, where I serve a good role.
Now, moving forward, what are your kind of overall goals being in this position? Do you have anything that you're not necessarily looking to achieve, but something you're shooting for?
Well, I mentioned that Sentinel Site program, and that's something that we're just kind of really getting revved up, and I think that has a lot of validity and a lot of application for the future serving. So that means our reserve would kind of serve as a model for other systems, both NERRs, but also just, marsh or estuarine systems. What can they expect based on what we're observing and tracking in response to climate change and sea level rise? And so that's one I'm particularly excited by. And just, I still every year seem to wind up assisting other groups and other researchers in bringing our swamp data into their research program. So one of the things that's happening, that I'm speaking with Stockton University right now, is they're starting to look to map the upper river area in the context of there's a lot of oyster farming that occurs up there. There's some clam farming that occurs in the mouth of the river, and again, we're tracking climate change, and there's things like erosion and rising waters essentially drowning the rivers. So there's some mapping projects that they're doing, and we're doing our best to kind of synchronize and apply our long-term swamp data to their mapping and projection projects in creating models for what the future may hold for both the system from a physical standpoint, but also these industries and these populations that both natural and farmed shellfish populations in the future.
Well, it definitely seems like you have your hands in a lot of different projects, but I can't think of anybody better to have that kind of position. And we are honestly so grateful to have you with us. You've already done so much, and we are so excited to see what else you bring to the table, how else you integrate everything we're doing into these other programs and new initiatives. So thank you again for joining us, and I can't wait to see what else you work on in the future.
All right, thank you.